Women who let crazy stuck their dick in you, what happened? I met this guy at my first job. He was 29, and I was 18. At first, he seemed great and worked very hard. I come from a traditional and wealthy family, so dating him felt like a big leap. He was not wealthy, was a different race, and was 11 years older than me. Worst mistake of my life. If I could talk to my 18-year-old self, I would tell her to run the moment he started speaking to her. He was completely unhinged. I think I missed the red flags because I was desperate to be in a relationship, to lose my virginity, and because I liked the attention. I also had very little experience. I got to know him for about a year before we started a relationship that lasted 2 years. During that time, he talked about contact with aliens, alien abductions, gang stalking, his inventions, and an all-powerful being bonded to him. At the same time, he was verbally and emotionally abusive. He claimed he was building an exoskeleton and said the world did not deserve his knowledge, which was why he refused to finish it. He often told me he was depressed, and I spent so much time trying to support him. I would drive to his house to comfort him and remind him that I loved him and wanted him alive. He accused me of cheating or being a lesbian because I mentioned being curious about a threescore. I would send him videos and pictures of my location to prove where I was, and he would claim they were fake or taken earlier. He constantly tried to make me doubt myself. Once he said he wondered what it would take to break me, while smirking. The only reason I stayed so long was because he threatened to tell my family and ruin my father's reputation. I eventually told my family everything, and they removed him from my life immediately. He only stopped harassing me once the police were involved, and I was preparing to get a restraining order. I am so relieved that he is no longer in my life. He truly believed he was being gang-stalked and abducted by aliens, and that he was an ancient soul or even descended from God or Jesus. Story 2. He tried to force me to choose between him and many activities I enjoyed. Super controlling behavior. I tried to break up with him like an adult. He reacted by pretending I wasn't serious, then escalated by threatening to take the truck we owned together and my dog and leave me in another state. I switched into survival mode, pretending I wasn't serious about breaking up while I looked for a way out. He escalated again, reading my emails and telling me which friends I could see, when I could see them, and what I could use our truck for. Thank goodness for my friends in Google Incognito mode. I left while he was at work and called him from a rest stop 2 hours away to tell him we were done. For those asking, I did not take the truck. I had a friend pick me up and my dog. Story 3. He became obsessive, refused to accept the breakup, would show up at my house just to talk. Then I got to have a fun talk with my mom, sisters, my gym, my landlord, friends, casual acquaintances, and my boss to let them know in case they saw him around. These are all awesome people to have to talk to about your intimate life. I had to change my locks, and I scan the room every time I go to any bar we've ever been to before in case I need to get the hell out of there. Being a lady is awesome. Story 4. He was troubled. His father was an alcoholic who offed himself, and he brought it up every time I tried to end things. We were 17 and 18 when he tried to convince me to run away with him, but I refused every time. It did not help that my mom adored him and we went to different schools, so I would come home and he would already be there waiting for me, every single day. After I finally broke it off, he drove by my house at all hours and left gifts on my porch. A few months later, he got a new girlfriend, and I started dating a friend of his. They suggested we all hang out. One evening, we rented a movie and got some alcohol. My ex and his girlfriend immediately started making out intensely, which did not bother me at first. But when she began moaning, I looked over and saw that he was staring directly at me while kissing her and touching her. I felt sick, so I pretended to feel unwell and left to walk home. On my way, he pulled up beside me and offered me a ride. I told him to leave me alone. He started screaming from his car, "Don't you get it? I would do anything for you. I love you. I would die for you." I ran the rest of the way home, cutting through yards so he could not follow me. I was almost crying by the time I got inside. My dad saw me and assumed my new boyfriend had hurt me. To protect him, I finally told my dad everything about my ex. I felt embarrassed and guilty and cried the whole time. My dad just listened and tucked me into bed. The next morning, I looked out the window and saw my ex's car across the street. By the time I got downstairs, my dad was walking back inside, and the car sped away. My dad calmly said, "I talked to him." I never saw my ex again. Later I realized I had started dating his friend without knowing they were friends, since we went to different schools. When I found out, I probably should have ended it, but I was young and not thinking clearly. My dad is a very stoic man. When I told him everything, he simply chuckled once and said, "Well, okay." Story 5. His lies gradually unraveled over time. By the time I got the courage to dump him, it had come out that he had been unemployed for 3 years, was still divorcing his wife, who was also his only relationship ever, whom he had been abusive toward, and had restraining orders against him. When I broke up with him, he called me every name in the book, then proposed, then threatened with self-harm. He would leave sobbing voicemails from different throwaway numbers, accused me of turning him into an alcoholic, and still occasionally pops up as having viewed any new social media accounts despite our relationship having been just a few months several years ago. His next ex wound up calling me for advice when he gave her the same treatment. Story 6. He turned into a gaslighting textbook sociopath. He pushed one of those standing, rotating fans on me while I was asleep. I woke up and he was just completely pissed off. I had no idea why. He told me he was talking to me while I was sleeping, and I rolled over so that I wasn't facing him. Apparently that infuriated him. He was a terrible person. That relationship only lasted about 5 months. It was a nightmare. Story 7. There was one guy I only dated twice, and he had already picked out names for our future children. That was a clear no for me. The next was an Italian exchange student. I was just friendly to him because he seemed lonely. One cup of tea somehow turned into a huge sheet of paper filled with love declarations. After that, I noticed him following me around the city, so I asked the campus warden to speak with him. I definitely dodged 2 very unstable situations. Story 8. I didn't even sleep with him. I took him home, but he freaked me out, so I asked him to leave. He sent me a barrage of texts and called me constantly for 2 months. He turned up outside my house at 3 a.m. and told me to come out or he'd come in. He alternated between abusive and aggressive, and acting like we were dating, which we had never. He eventually went away, but I learned he'd just moved on to bothering another girl in town. Story 9. We hooked up on Friday. 2 days later, he was standing outside my door telling me to get dressed and that we were going on a walk. He was being pretty loud, and I had already gotten a noise complaint from my neighbors, so I decided to go with him. We're on a walk, and I steer us towards the tourist parts of the cities we won't be alone. About 10 minutes into our walk, he asks me, "Are you seeing other guys?" Reminder, I met him 2 days ago. I say no, but he replies with, "Okay, then who was the blonde guy I saw yesterday?" Turns out he has been following me the last 2 days, and I start freaking out. I tell him I have to go back home, and he says he's going to go with me there for safety. He then starts talking about our future marriage, that he will take me to his parents in 2 weeks and that he wants kids when we're still young. I kissed him bye and ran into my apartment and didn't leave for days, saw him on my street a couple of months later but never talked to him again. Story 10. He didn't stick his dong in anything. He was a friend of a friend, and we talked at a house party, exchanged numbers and borrowed a book of his. This was before smartphones. Dude started calling me every day, multiple times a day, and eventually confessed to me that he believed that he was chosen by God to defend me in the coming apocalypse. He would show up at my house. This was right after high school and I still lived with my parents, and try to come inside. He panicked when I was ignoring and avoiding him because he was trying to make sure we were ready to rebuild civilization and fight demons. He was dead serious. I finally answered his call one day telling him I wasn't interested in being friends anymore and I didn't want to get involved in his plans. I didn't give him any explanation. He wanted to come pick up his book and somehow handled it pretty well when I said I'd get back to him about it. I got his address from my friend and my dad, and I dropped the book at his house at a strange hour so that I could tell him he already had it back and to leave me alone. I moved out pretty quickly after that and found out he moved out of state. Story 11. He convinced me that his pre-existing alcohol problem was my fault. He said I was controlling him for asking him not to get drunk every day and spend all our money on alcohol and cigarettes. He told me my depression was my fault and that my panic attacks were just me trying to get attention. He guilted me into sleeping with him, screamed at me in the street more than once, brought drug dealers into our home, and kept me up all night arguing and shouting when I had work the next day. When I finally told him to leave, he showed up at 3 in the morning, drunk. I had left him at the pub hours earlier and told him not to come home. He threatened to smash in the front door. I let him inside because I was afraid he would damage the house and I would lose my deposit or be charged for repairs. I called the police, but they told me to leave because he doesn't seem that drunk, he's being reasonable. I still struggle with the fact that I stayed with him for 4 years. Story 12. A guy made an anonymous Facebook and told me he saw me around and loved me. He knew the bar I hung out at, the street I lived on, and about what house was mine. At one point he told me he was skulking around in my backyard. He kept messaging me offers for the best banging of my life if I met up with him and wouldn't tell me who he was. Story 13. He would constantly text me while I was at work even though I wasn't supposed to be using my phone, and then get mad and accuse me of cheating when I couldn't answer right away. He didn't want me sitting in the break area around my coworkers and would get angry if I didn't call him during my break. If I had to take my lunch late working retail at the time, where when you go to lunch depends heavily on coverage, he'd get furious and accuse me of cheating. When I wasn't at work, I could barely use the bathroom without him being right there. He once got angry because I talked on the phone with my mother in front of him and would completely lose it if I tried to have any conversation with anyone other than him. The day before I broke up with him, he took a large dose of his alprazolam, an anti-anxiety medication, best known by the brand name Xanax XR, shortly after I went to work and slept for almost my entire shift. There were other people with him at the time, and he was being closely watched. During my lunch break, I wanted to call an ambulance, but the friend watching him, who had far more experience with drugs than I ever will, said he wasn't comatose, just sleeping, and promised she would call an ambulance if she saw any signs of trouble. By the time my shift ended and I returned, he was awake, alert, and furious, accusing me of leaving him to die. I got maybe 2 hours of sleep that night because he refused to let me rest until just a few hours before my next shift. When I finally broke up with him, he responded violently. That caused hairline fractures in 2 parts of my orbital socket, broke my nose, my glasses flew off during the impact, breaking it, and rendered me unconscious for about 10 minutes. Several years later, I still experience horrific migraines, and I can feel the old skull fractures and my never-fixed broken nose whenever it gets cold. On the upside, he went away for nearly 5 years after that. A few years later, I met and married an amazing woman. I no longer have to worry about that ex trying to start anything, as he passed away less than a year after getting out of prison. Story 14. Nothing personally happened to me other than being outcasted by my entire town of 3,000 people. No one bothered to tell me my new boyfriend was a rapist. Everyone knew but didn't bother to tell me anything. After I found out, I immediately dumped him. All of this happened in a week. He was found with loads of drugs on him on Sunday, bailed out on Tuesday, put his dad in the hospital on Wednesday, withdrew $20,000 out of his dad's account on Thursday, and disappeared Friday morning. No one's seen him in 3 years. I'm glad I didn't get tied in with that. Story 15. Hell, I didn't even get to that point. Old flame from my 20s reaches out. We texted back and forth. Nothing of significance that I could see. Apparently there was on his side. He was pissed I didn't invite him to watch Super Bowl when I mentioned I was going out with friends. Obsessively texted me and called me a slut when I met male and my female friends at a brew fest and then either insulted me or apologized for his behavior. He was nuts. I was worried about blocking him as I needed to know where he was, just in case he dropped by. He had never been to my house, but I had to be careful. He legit scared me. Finally, he left me alone. Texted me about a year later from a new number. I lied and said I had gotten married, and for him to leave me alone. So far so good. Story 16. The violence started. Stupidly pathetic things would set him off and lead to all sorts of nut bar behavior. He once screamed himself insensible because I said Wikipedia was not a reliable source for facts. Got incredibly drunk in front of my family, who he'd just met. They made the mistake of buying him sake. He sculled the lot and spent the afternoon working himself into a rage, convincing himself I was interested in my sister's flatmate. He also got ridiculously angry one time because I called him silly sodas in a joking context. He has either murdered someone or will in the future. I escaped from his house, walked until I found a bus, and flew home later that day. He kept harassing me until I called in a favor. Story 17. Slept with the guy who installed my alarm system one time. Month later, he wants to hang out after not talking since we slept together BWE, and I told him no because I was having a girls' day with my best friend. Woke up from a drunken nap to 30 missed calls, voicemails, and text messages saying how we're over and he never wants to see me again. Dodge that bullet. Story 18. I just realized how sexist I've been. Whenever I read a story about a crazy girl, my thoughts were, don't stick your dong in crazy. But reading the stories posted here, I noticed my first thoughts would have been, those girls are stupid for putting up with these guys. So I was also blaming the women for the guys being the crazy part. I never noticed that before. This just opened my eyes and I'm ashamed of myself. Story 19. I work at a coffee shop and a super nice regular had asked to talk to me about a history topic we both liked. I'm a history major, so I love talking to people who are excited about what I like. We have been texting for a few weeks and I'm excited to have made a new friend. I even tell my boyfriend about this new guy that likes the same kind of history as me. Fast forward a few days, the history dude sends a bouquet of expensive flowers to the store that I work at and offers me an exclusive trip to Europe with him. He memorized when I'm usually at work and comes into the store every day around that time. He tells his mom about me, and she comes into the store asking my coworkers about me and demands to meet me. I just hid in the back and blocked his number. We only talked, never did anything, but damn was he crazy. Story 20. I dated this guy for 2 months. I took his virginity, and after that he became extremely clingy. If I hung out with my best friend of 3 years who happens to be a guy, he would get super angry like, dude, he's been my best friend longer than I've even known you. I broke it off and he went crazy. All his Snapchats, social media posts, and things he said to our friends were about how I was a horrible person and how he thought he wanted to marry me. This went on for more than 3 months. He probably got attached because I popped his cherry, but I don't think dating for 2 months is enough time to decide you're gonna marry someone. Jealous and clingy people really don't do it for me. Story 21. Oh, this is a good one. Brought back memories of one of my Tinder matches. I think I was around 18 years old when we matched on Tinder. He was very nice, actually friends with some people I knew, and a bit older, 24, which I was very into. He was also into music and played in a band. We lived in different cities, about 1.5 hours away from each other. Everything started off great, but doesn't it always? I was wrong. We went on a couple of dates and started hooking up. This went on for about a month. I told him I wasn't looking for anything serious, since I had just moved out of my parents' house and wanted to enjoy my newfound freedom. After about 2 months of hooking up from time to time, things slowly started to change. He wanted to try more phone or cam thing, which made me uncomfortable because I was worried he might leak my private pictures. To reassure me, he would send videos of himself soloing. Just before he was done, he would slap himself and scream my name at the top of his lungs. I consider myself very open-minded, but that completely turned me off. The next time we met for coffee, I told him I wasn't comfortable with the videos and that maybe we could find something that worked for both of us. This was non-negotiable for him, so I tried to end things. We were not in a serious relationship. He became very upset and started harassing me with even more videos, including some where he was crying while doing it, along with endless texts about how much he loved me and how he thought we would always be together. I tried talking to him, apologized if I had given him the wrong impression, and said goodbye. When that did not work, I blocked him. Then he started showing up at my workplace and at my school. One day he would threaten to hurt himself. The next he would buy me roses and teddy bears. I told my parents, contacted the police, and got a restraining order against him. After that, I never heard from him again. He now plays in a band for a famous singer in my country, which makes it uncomfortable whenever I see him on television. It always reminds me of him crying, yelling my name, and sending those videos. Story 22. Does nearly count? Was young, dumb, and really wanting someone to lean on after having a baby at a young age. Got with a guy that I knew for a long time, and he was insistent on us being intimate. Nearly did. Until I tapped out last second and started crying when I said I wasn't ready. Immediately he rolls over and sulks because he didn't get what he wanted. Over time he got more controlling and joking about me not having any contact with men, including family. Cried like a baby when I dumped him, and then internet stalked me by sending anon messages on Ask Me. Haven't heard from him after I called him out on it. And that was a few years ago. I'd like to keep it that way. Story 23. My ex loosened the lug nuts on my left side of my car. Luckily, I took a detour to get an iced coffee before jumping on the highway. My steering wheel started wobbling so bad as I exited the drive-thru, I pulled into a gas station to check my tires, and some random homeless man runs over and tells me he thinks I'm going to lose my back wheel. This man then tightens all my tires up and checked the pressure and sends me on my way, refusing to take my cash. He said I could be his daughter, so he had to fix it. I broke up with my BF and went back to the gas stations about 5 times, but never found the homeless guys again. Story 24. We went to a party with his family. He promised he wouldn't drink, but he ended up completely hammered because he wanted me to see what happened when he drank. I ended up taking him to my place while his mom watched his son. In the middle of the night, he got out of bed and peed on my dresser. A little later, he rushed out the back door and vomited over my balcony. Same guy. Another time we were cooking at his place, he said he had to go into town really quickly but didn't come back for a long time. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. I got in my car and drove around to all the places he could be, knocked on doors, and maybe even went to his mom's. Though I've forced myself to forget a lot of this. The last place I checked was my own back porch. He had gone off somewhere on drugs because I had expressed some doubt in our relationship. Add to all of this the constant lies, gaslighting, and psychological manipulation. I dodged a huge bullet when I finally left. Story 25. Gaslit me for a year and a half and destroyed my self-confidence. I tried breaking up with him, but according to him we have to agree to break up to be broken up. He didn't agree, which meant he showed up everywhere I did, left me notes in my locked car, left me gifts in my room, when neither me nor my roommates let him in or saw him come by, harassed anyone I dated, called me telling me he was going to hurt himself, would sit outside my house or by my car in the parking lot at the university for hours. He would constantly text me from those websites that generate new numbers for you saying how much he hated me, how I'm a whore, how he wanted to stab me to death and play with my blood, he wanted to pee on my grave. Wouldn't stop trying to contact me for 3 years after, and this time I got married and moved out of state. I haven't heard from him in a couple months, so I think it's all over, finally. Story 26. I tried to break up with my high school boyfriend of 3 years about 4 times before it finally stuck. Whenever I tried, he'd hold me against walls and cry, tell me I wasn't allowed to leave him. He once cornered me and played with a knife as he told me how much he loved me. The last time, I broke up with him over text because I feared for my life. Duh. I was trying to avoid that and not be crappy, but it had to be done. His mom called me saying he was running around the house threatening to hurt himself. I could hear him yelling in the background things to tell me, and that I needed to get over there and say sorry. I hung up on her and never spoke to him again. Oh, did I mention I kept trying to dump him because he had a whole other girlfriend of like 6 months? Story 27. He was trying to control who I talked to and when I'd play games and wouldn't let me play games without him even though he'd get so raged and toxic that I hated playing with him like that. Eventually, I slowly pulled the band-aid off by breaking up with him and promising we'd still be friends, then getting my stuff back from one last weekend together and never seeing him ever again. He sent threatening emails for months and even called my work afterwards, but I left the job and moved, and now I no longer receive those emails. Never meet men in the wild. Lol. Story 28. Jesus. The comments here are insane. Hugs and cheers to lessons learned. This will probably get buried under thousands of comments, but here goes nothing. I met a guy online, and we hooked up after dinner. Afterwards, he started talking about ghosts and the supernatural in a paranoid way. I also heard him watching porn in the bathroom for more than 15 minutes. I went home and told myself there would be no second date. Something felt off about him. A few weeks later, he started texting me and adding or following me on social media, using my phone number to find me. I thought it was harmless since I do not post much anyway. He asked me out again, apologized for last time, and said we could have a proper date. I agreed and we set a date. On the day of the date, he made me wait for an hour. Thankfully, I was at a bookstore, so I was not too bored. After a while, he messaged me saying he forgot the time, even though I had confirmed it the night before. I told him to delete my number because I was no longer interested. He continued messaging me for about a year. I blocked him several times. He kept saying he had changed, but I did not care. The last message he sent was an insult, calling me heartless. A year later, he met my friend online, and they have now been together for more than a year. My friend told me he confessed everything after realizing we were friends. My suspicions were confirmed when she said he had been using drugs at the time. I told her, be careful, and do not settle. Now he shows up at some of our gatherings and events along with his friends. Oh Lord. Story 29. I guess this applies. Not me, but some stranger I helped. She apparently liked some guy only to find out he was later a convicted criminal. He was later placed on house arrest, and he became abusive. She was too scared to leave and all of her stuff was at his house, but one day while he was in court, she ran away. She stumbled into my workplace crying, and I offered her some coffee/a soda to help her cope a little. After my shift ended, I drove her out to a location where she told me a friend was staying and let her out. Haven't heard from her since, but her friend did come out of the building to meet her. I realized this could have been a trap to mug me, but I also realized that this could be legit and that nobody else was going to help her if I didn't. Driving back that night, I took numerous U-turns and twists back home to make sure I wasn't followed. Hope she's doing well. Story 30. He never got to stick it in me, but I met up with him at his place. He was a lot older than he said he was. And, looked at it, even though my Tinder account said I wasn't looking for any exclusive relationships, he was making all these rules. 1. Every time we went out, I would pay until he decided he wanted to date me officially. 2. Wasn't allowed to have male friends. 3. Wasn't allowed to have female friends he didn't approve of. I told him I would think about it and noped out of there as soon as I could with a promise to call him. When I made it safe, I texted him that I was not interested in his offer and to never contact me again. It was quiet for a while as I went on with my life. Then he started harassing me with texts and voicemails about how ugly and disgusting I was. I'd block his number, and he would text me from another number. It wasn't until I threatened to call the cops and send them to his place with screenshots and recordings of his messages that he finally stopped. Story 31. When I decided to break things off, he refused. He then began to stalk me. He'd hidden near the road I had to walk to get home. Afterwards, he'd let me know that he saw me walking all alone and would tell me all the things he could have done for me. He then began to show up at my house at 3 a.m. to tap on my bedroom window. When I changed my schedule and routes, he could no longer find me. He began to call and text, letting me know that he was going to off himself. This mess went on for about a year, until one day his sister heard him threatening me. He initially threatened her and told her not to get involved, but I didn't hear from him after that. Unfortunately, I live in a relatively small country, so I run into him from time to time and always worry that it will start all over again. Story 32. Thought he was in control of everything. He told me to shut up when I told him his friends were always rude to me. His friends always harassed me, and he told me I was being a baby about it. One of my friends decided to say that he should talk to his friends about what they were doing. He decided to scream at me in front of everyone, saying I was a whore and that he never loved me or wanted to be with me. He shoved me into the wall a few times and left. Texted me later saying he loved me and that he always knew I was the one he wanted to marry. Stuff like this happened all the time, but luckily my friends helped me break it off. Always listen to your friends when they try to help. Story 33. This happened after a single kiss, not a crazy one. Literally a 0.02 second peck. I worked at a diner and had matched with one of our regulars on Tinder. Decided since I see him weekly at work, he can't be that bad. After the first date, he asked me to hang out again. I said sure, and we tried to plan another date. I barely knew him, so I said I would drive and meet him somewhere, but he insisted he could pick me up. I politely declined multiple times, and he started asking for my address so he could prove it would be better for him to pick me up. I phased him out and told him I had work and wasn't feeling so well the day that we were supposed to hang out, and figured that would be the end of it. Well, he showed up at my job, sat in my section, and ate. He then pulled out a thermos of tea from his backpack and asked me to grab 2 mugs and drink a cup with him. I declined and dropped a single mug, and he checked off at his table and kept serving my other tables. Well, after about 30 minutes of him sitting there asking me to bring a mug over every time I walked past him, I started to get creeped out. My manager noticed and let me hide in the kitchen. The dude waited for another 45 minutes, and I eventually had to go out and work. He saw me, slipped a $5 bill in my apron pocket, and told me he would see me later. I shook it off and forgot about it. An hour later, he came back to the diner to use the bathroom. When he left, I checked my phone and had a text from him. "You're not feeling well, I'll drive you home. I'm in a tan truck in the front." I showed my manager and he replied that this wasn't working out and that I wanted to be left alone. The guy went off. He cursed me out over text and then started circling the parking lot. My manager was a G and stood outside watching him and called the cops for me. I see him around town still sometimes and get the creeps. Story 24. We never slept together and we never even dated. I had just gone through a terrible breakup and did not want to be with anyone. I was in such a bad mental state that I barely let people touch me. There was a slight mutual attraction at first and the occasional friendly hug, but it faded and I never even told him about it. He could not let it go. I kept telling him again and again that I was not interested in being with anyone. We went out for Halloween and he helped me when I got far too drunk. He brought me home safely, but the next day he acted strange. I thought I had said something wrong, but he was upset that his night ended early at 3 in the morning and that I had let someone pick me up for a picture. His friend even made a comment about how wild I was for taking that photo. That was when I started to suspect he was telling people we were more than we were. He argued with me constantly and kept sending inappropriate memes, even though I repeatedly told him to stop. He would put his hand on my shoulder or poke my side, and every single time I told him I did not want to be touched. Once he stole my bike as a joke and replaced it with my old one that had broken down. They were identical, and he was the only person who knew about the old one because I had asked him to pick me up when it stopped working. That really scared me. He walked out from behind a building with my old bike, smiling, and said he was sorry. I said, "It's fine," and left for work. One night, he walked me back to my room in the military dorms and pressured me into kissing him. He kept asking over and over until I gave in. He tried again, but I refused, and he eventually left. I finally confronted him and told him enough was enough. I did not want to date him. Not just anyone, him specifically. We had only ever been friends. I had never expressed interest in being with him and had constantly reminded him of the boundaries he kept crossing. When we were not speaking much, a mutual friend would often come by to check on me. I suspected he was sending him. I told him that being around him felt like having the stress of a boyfriend with none of the benefits. I was done. He asked if he could come over to explain, and against my better judgment, I said yes. He claimed he had been acting erratically because he was going through a difficult time. A girl from his squadron had accused him of SA. He said there was no evidence and that nothing came of it, but he was shaken by the accusation. That only made things worse for me. I ended the friendship and told him that if he contacted me again, I would report him to my leadership. About 6 months went by with no contact. One day he texted me out of the blue, saying he was very sorry for everything and that there was no excuse for his behavior. I'm a sucker for an apology, so I said all was good. I didn't mind an occasional "what's up" text, but I no longer felt comfortable hanging out. By then I was seeing someone, my first real dive into dating since my awful breakup. We were out on a date when he texted me. He had asked earlier about wine and was now wondering if I wanted to hang out downtown. I randomly replied that we were with someone and that I didn't want to hang out. Stupid to even answer, I know. He texted a few more times, which I ignored. Later, I saw he had asked if he could just drop by my date to say hello. I don't know why I responded. I wish I hadn't, but I'm also glad I did. I told him we were no longer in the city and were going to bed. Around 4:30 in the morning, I heard someone knocking on my door. It was the mutual friend that I assume he had sent to see what I was up to. I was mortified and scared. I explained everything to the guy I was seeing and cursed myself for not letting him open the door. We ignored it until he left. I had had enough. The next day, I went to my leadership. I explained everything, gave names, and mentioned squadrons. I offered to provide texts as proof. I was embarrassed recounting the incident in which he pressured me into kissing him. They told me they didn't need the texts. I asked to move rooms, since we were in the same building and his friend was on my floor, but they never got back to me. He was not officially given any notice or paperwork telling him to stay away from me. It turned out he and his friends just received a stern warning. I felt like they didn't care, like I hadn't made it sound serious enough. This was a man about 6 feet 2 inches tall and around 200 pounds. I was nearly 1 foot shorter and weighed only about 145 pounds at the time. If he had wanted to do something, what could I have done to stop him? I felt like bringing it up again would make me seem dramatic or vindictive. I struggled with that a lot and blamed myself for a while. I thought that if he ever escalated with another girl, it would be my fault for not stopping it. He tried to contact me a few more times. I brought it up again to my new leadership, but I got the sense it wasn't taken seriously. The last thing I heard from him was through Snapchat messages from a buddy of his. He tried to explain that he had been through a lot, felt bad, and wanted me to understand why Crazy Guy had behaved that way. I went off. I told him I never wanted to hear from him again. I would report them all to leadership if he ever contacted me again. I told him he was crazy and selfish. I didn't want an explanation. I wanted to be left alone. To this day, if I saw him, I think I would rage, scream, and make it my mission to ruin his career. I hope that jerk ends up in jail. And as far as zero tolerance for SA goes, BS. Shame on the people who didn't think twice about what happened. Shame on the people who never even checked to see if I felt safe. Stay safe, ladies and gentlemen. This can happen to you too. Don't let anyone make you feel uncomfortable or unsafe. Crazy Guy wouldn't accept that I just didn't want to be friends. He essayed me until I spoke up, and nothing really got done except being told to leave me alone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.